So, in terms of Edinburgh Fringe, I am Thanos because I am collecting the Vincents. I have had 2 Vincents on so far, and today I'm making it a 3rd Vincent. Could you tell me your name and your show title, please?
That's spectacular. My name is Joe Coffey, and the show that I have is a solo play called Paint, Vincent, Paint.
How are you today, Joe? You well?
I'm excellent, yeah. Just got off of a show actually. It was the 13th, and we're tipping now into the last week, the final week of Fringe, and the show went very well. We filmed it for the first time, and the audience was very engaged, so it's exciting.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what is Paint, Vincent, Paint, and what emphasis do you put, what word do you put the emphasis on, and how do you emphasize it? Is it Paint, Vincent, Paint, or is it Paint, Vincent? What is your show?
Run, Jack, run.
Exactly.
It's his early life. So it's the unknown story of Vincent van Gogh, the pain before the paintbrush, if you will. Spoiler alert, by the end of the play, Vincent decides he's meant to pick up the brush. I think giving that away is not that big of a deal because what was interesting to me was his childhood, the influence of Les Miserables in his life, and the writings of Victor Hugo had a big impact in terms of how he viewed the poor and the working class and how he had so much empathy for them. And then the play also talks about his time in the coal mines where he was a missionary for 2 years. And those stirrings and those direct influences all attributed to Vincent's ultimately deciding, you know what, I want to highlight humanity through my artwork.
How much is known of Vincent's early life? Is his early life as well known as his later career?
I would argue not. Just talking to the regular person like myself on the street before I started researching for the past 2 years about him, most of the people 9 out of 10 people that I talk to say, oh yeah, wasn't he a madman and cut off his ear? I mean, that's, the extent.
Those are kind of a touchstones of Vincent.
Right, yeah. So it's been really fascinating digging deeper into his early life.
And what were some of the things you found out about Vincent's early life?
He was a bit of a recluse, deeply introverted child. His father was a minister and had a bit of a domineering fist on the family. And Vincent grew up in his father's shadow. His father was the big man in the small town of Zundert. The parsonage that the father had from the church was next door to a cemetery. That comes into the story. So, and there was a bit of a family secret, which I was surprised to find out through my research, and that also comes out in the play. And then just his fascination for nature, even as a young boy. He would go walking through the woods with his mother and pick up pine cones and flowers and different insects, and he would pin them to pieces of paper and go home and find the Latin names for them and write them underneath. And then he would start sketching, even as a boy. And that was really interesting, too.
And what was it that drew you to Vincent to tell this story? Which is kind of a broad question, but...
Yeah.
What?
Well, both of my parents are painters, so there's always been paintings in my life, all around the house. And I have always been kind of curious to know more about him. During the pandemic, I had started writing more and brought a solo play actually about Whitey Bulger. He was an Irish crime boss in Boston in the 70s and 80s. Excuse me. And researched about his life growing up in South Boston and wrote a play and brought it here in 2024 to Edinburgh. And then while I was here, I was thinking about, what's the next play that I want to write about? And I was, not to sound too woo-woo here, but I was sitting in a garden, literally down in the Mayfield area, Newington, and I started looking at the way the light was coming through the leaves of the tree next to me, and then I saw how the light was like cast on the Gothic architecture of a building nearby, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this is how painters look at light. This is interesting. And I started talking to my parents more about it, and then I started thinking about like different painters that I know of, and this kind of rabbit holed its way to wanting to learn more about Vincent.
With your parents being painters, were they naturally interested in the show and about this part of Vincent's life, or were they very much like, oh, we don't know this, what can we do about it?
Yeah, very much so. It got to the point where I was doing, for me, the fun part is the research, right? And you're going to libraries and you're sleuthing around and unearthing all these hidden gems and treasures that no one knows about. It's like, oh, how can I, bring this to the stage, and how can I bring this to life? My parents at one point were like, all right, look, you've done enough research. Like, pump the brakes, start writing. So they were eager for me to really get the story going. And yeah, ever since the beginning, they were always interested, particularly about his time in the coal mines.
Which is something I never knew until you just said it. So how did that inspire him or even hinder him?
So I believe that part of his reason for wanting to be a missionary was to please his father. And I think during his time there, he realized that this wasn't working out. He was failing. He was taking everything to the extreme, which is what he had a tendency to do as a boy. And he sold his church robes. He gave away his shack that the church provided to the poor. And he really wanted to live amongst the people and know them, and not just, pontificate doctrine and stand afar from them and be, I am the authoritative figure of God, like, you must listen to me kind of thing. And I thought that was really unique, particularly for ministers at that time. But the church frowned upon it. And a few months into him doing his work there, they showed up and said, this isn't how we operate. And they cut him off. And he chose to stay and still be amongst the people. And he was, ironically very Christ-like to them. But from there, he realized, there's no way for me to make a living here. So then he ventured out afterwards, and with some of which came from the encouragement from his brother Teo, who saw his talents at an early age in painting. Vincent eventually said, okay, maybe it's time for me to pick up the brush.
When researching Vincent and putting the show together, did you find any parallels between your life and Vincent, and did that make you feel closer to him as a person and an artist? Yeah,
I think a through line, if you will, in the story is finding one's purpose. You can argue within the context of the play what Vincent's purpose was. One could say, oh, his purpose was to become a painter. One could say his purpose was to love others. So I have wrestled with finding my own purpose and, I guess just meaning and truth in life, like we all have, which is the human condition. We're all just trying to figure out what the heck we're doing here.
I still don't know.
So that was something that, definitely was a parallel with Vincent's life.
I believe I said this in an earlier interview, so if you listened to that interview and now you're listening to this one, please forgive me, I'm going to ask it again. Looking at Vincent in 2026, it's very easy to say, oh, he had X mental condition, he had Y mental condition. How do you think that affected him as an artist and as a person, looking at it through a 2026 lens?
Yeah, I know that they didn't have the medical terms, right, back then that we have today. You could say, oh, he was bipolar, he was schizophrenic, he was this, and this. I wonder if Vincent's mental instabilities and insecurities stemmed from something deeper. And I explore this in the story. And it kind of ties into the quote-unquote family secret. I think he had not to sound like too cliche here, but he had a really big heart, and he empathized with people to the point where he ached, and it was he had almost an oversensitivity for people. So I don't know, and I don't know if I can even draw a parallel to someone in 2026 saying like, oh, that's the Vincent van Gogh of our day, you know. But yeah, just a fascinating, beautiful sunflower of a man.
Was it important to you to reach beyond as we said earlier, he cut his ear off and he did Starry Night? Like, how important was it to you to connect to Vincent on a level that isn't that?
It is absolutely the very important to the humanity of the story. He has this mythological way about him, right? When we think of Vincent van Gogh, he's almost like untouchable. And so I wanted to ground him and show Vincent the young boy, Vincent the teenager, Vincent the young man, just trying to please his parents, trying to find his own way in this world. And was interesting too, at that time, the printing press was starting to really come about, and all of a sudden, all of these craft shops, all of these workers were being replaced with machines. So it's interesting too to kind of see the parallel of what's going on today and back then.
Yeah. I think one of the things I think about Vincent is about his vulnerability, and it's almost a desire to want to protect the man, but also let him know how important he was. And is that something you feel about Vincent? How do you feel about him?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think that he had an incredible amount of sensitivity towards others, which is incredibly admirable. And he was willing to be vulnerable, which was why I think he was outcast so much, because people were, put off and confused. And when someone is vulnerable, it's easy to label them as being too soft, or it's easy to kind of like step over them, which is what I think eventually happened with him in Arles. When the townspeople signed a petition saying that they didn't want him around anymore. And the idea of him being the social outcast is interesting, because that inner turmoil of really like not knowing how to navigate life, what his purpose was, and this extreme amount of sensitivity for people, all kind of culminated into this perfect storm. And so it was easy for people to kind of just put him in a box.
Yeah, and again, looking at it from a 2020 point of view, the boxes come into it again, because you can say, oh, he had bipolar, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but it's almost like he grew beyond that to become, as you said again, a myth, something that is culturally significant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What were some of the other people that you interviewed having to say about Vincent?
They said about, one of them was a show which was maybe taken a little bit lighter, and the other show I spoke to, they were saying about how he is pretty much eternal. His work will last forever, which I think is a good way of thinking about him. And it's kind of comforting in a way that the paintings that I admire will be seen by my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. The famous story is that he never saw his success in his lifetime. I wonder how he would feel about that. How do you think Vincent feels about his legacy?
Yeah. I know that he probably wouldn't want the attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, he seems like he was more about the work and less about the fame, which I think is very admirable. And as much as, actors need to market themselves and put themselves out there, and artists, I think he would be totally against all that and just really make it about the work. And I think in a way that allowed him to focus so much on the work and not be distracted by all the other things. And it was fortunate that his brother was so encouraging and supportive, and financially too. Giving him monthly stipends and such, which was incredibly helpful for him to be able to do all those paintings.
Do you think in 2026 he'd maybe be similar to a Banksy, where a piece of work just turns up and it's this alias Banksy?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair parallel. Yeah.
What is next for the show after the Fringe? Where are you taking it? Could you maybe expand it further?
Yeah, there is a festival in Los Angeles that I'm potentially going to be showcasing it again in November, and then I'll probably do it for Hollywood Fringe come June. We'll see what happens in between there. I definitely want to get back together with my director in Los Angeles and just spitball some more things. It's interesting to see the evolution of show 1 versus show 13, and then hopefully eventually show 20 here at Fringe, and see all of the nuances, all of the different beats, and just the fluidity of how this is working, this isn't. Or maybe we can cut here, maybe we can add here. It's really been an interesting workshop to bring it here to Edinburgh, and the audiences have been really engaged, and the feedback has been remarkable.
And it must be quite a journey as well, having to go into Vincent every day and, as you said, discovering the nuances and different things you want to portray and portray things in a different way.
Yeah, it's exhausting, honestly. My show is at 2:55 every day except Sundays, and it lasts, just about 50 minutes, and I'm drenched with sweat and just exhausted by the end. I have friends who have shows at night, and I'll eventually get to them, but I'm more of a morning guy. I think after the show, I could just go home, take a shower, and get to bed pretty soon.
Yeah, you're all Vincent all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Where can people find about you online?
I have an Instagram. It's at Cup of Joe Coffey. That's Coffey. And my email is joecof@gmail.com. If anybody has any questions or just wants to chat, those are my best modes of communication.
Joe, thank you so much for coming in. Good luck with the show.
I really appreciate you, Peter. Thank you.
Paint Vincent Paint is playing every day at 2:55 p.m. at Olive Studios at Greenside at George Street. Every day until the 29th of August. For more information and for tickets, go to edfringe.com and type in Paint Vincent Paint. Until next time, I've been Peter Greenwood. I've taken the Peter Greenwood Show up to the Edinburgh Fringe, and I've spoken to some people.